Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today I bring you Doug McCormick. For years, I struggled to find the clarity of purpose in my life and the single-minded focus that I had when I was an athlete. It just felt like I was working hard but not really getting any closer to where I wanted to go. And to be honest, I really didn't even know or have a clear vision on where I wanted to go. Then I discovered a powerful 4-step blueprint that I began to apply to my life, and it changed everything. Now, every morning, I'm excited to attack the day because I have a clarity of purpose and I have confidence in my plan and I have peace of mind in knowing that I'm back on that path to elite success. Anyone, and I mean anyone, can use this 4-step process to recreate the key elements in the life of an elite performer so you can regain that clarity of purpose and that single-minded focus so that you can both achieve your goals and live a balanced life. I created a free PDF for you outlining the 4-step Reveal Your Path Blueprint for Success. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/blueprint. That's jimharshawjr.com/blueprint to get instant access to that free PDF. As managing partner at HCI Equity, Doug oversees all aspects of the firm's strategy, investments, and operations with his partners. Doug previously served as a captain in the U.S. Army's 25th Infantry Division. He graduated top of his class at West Point while serving as captain of the Army wrestling team. He also holds an MBA from the Harvard Business School. Doug has a lifetime of experiences that provide the foundation for the framework, principles, and tools in his new book, Family Inc., Using Business Principles to Maximize Your Family's Wealth. As a professional investor, he's spent 2 decades managing money for institutional clients such as insurance companies, pension funds, entrepreneurs, and high net worth families. And unlike Wall Street money managers who seek to generate paper profits through passive investing, Doug partners with families and entrepreneurs to build and grow their businesses to create sustainable long-term value. His own journey to achieving financial independence began at the ripe age of 7 when his dad helped him purchase AT&T stock. So we're going to get into Doug's story. And as always, if you don't get to listen to the entire episode, or if you hear something you like and you didn't get a chance to write it down, grab your copy of the action plan. It's about a 2-page PDF. Just go to jimharshawjr.com/action. That's jimharshawjr.com/action. Doug, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, your name came up. Lou Bannock mentioned your name. For those who don't know, Lou Bannock is an Olympic gold medalist wrestler. Comes from a wrestling family, kind of a legendary wrestling family, and he spoke out at the National Wrestling Championships at the Wrestlers in Business event. And your name came up, and I wrote it down, and I made a point to reach out to you because I heard some great things about you and about your book. So, Doug, can you start out by just telling us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and that sort of thing?
Sure. Well, you covered some of the highlights, but I think life is best told as a journey. And so I start out a small town Pennsylvania guy from Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, and I highlight Pennsylvania because as you know, you learn to wrestle before you learn to walk in many parts of that state. So right. I think my early youth, I kind of defined myself as a wrestler. And ultimately decided to attend school at West Point. That's actually where I crossed paths with Lou, who's been a great mentor and a good friend for many years. But decided to go to the academy. So I was a cadet for a period of time. And I went because I thought it was a great education. The concept of service was one that was interesting to me. But candidly, because I got recruited to wrestle for the Army team, and that seemed like a great adventure as well. And as part of that experience, there's a service commitment. So I graduated and got commissioned as an Army officer an infantry officer. And so I spent a little less than 5 years in active duty service, and decided that was a great experience and a great adventure, but not a great life choice for me and not going to be a career. And so I navigated a transition out of service, and candidly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I used the opportunity to go back to business school, and I was fortunate enough to get accepted to Harvard. So I did a 2-year program up in Boston, and by then I had a young family, but have always kind of had an interest in finance. I was an economics major undergrad. And so did investment banking for a couple years down in Manhattan for Morgan Stanley, and ultimately decided that that was an interesting career, but not one that I wanted to do long term. The work-life balance is pretty challenging, candidly. And so I went to the buy side. So I was essentially investing money for other people. And now today I consider myself more of an entrepreneur than an investor. About 10 years ago, I started my own investment firm with 2 partners. And so we're managing money on behalf of institutions. But I think I'm an entrepreneur, a small business owner, like a lot of the folks that we partner with.
And so you write a book on personal finance, your new book, Family Inc. Why another book on personal finance, and how is this different? Actually, let me preface this by saying first, thank you for your service. Like you said, you've served overseas and you've served our country. So thank you for that. But to the question, why another book on personal finance, and how's this different?
Yeah. So first of all, you are absolutely correct in the way you asked that question with a little bit of skepticism, because it's a very crowded market. If you go to the bookstore, there's thousands of books on personal finance. So first of all, I would tell you, I think it's one of the biggest problems in America that no one is really talking about. And if you look at, the political debate today, I really believe it's what people are expressing is the anxiety they feel about their financial prospects. And the statistics around financial literacy or the lack of financial security are horrendous. The average family doesn't budget. The average family has, $15,000 worth of credit card debt. And probably some of the scariest statistics are things around most Americans' lack of preparedness for retirement. So it's a really big problem today. And not to be too depressing, but I think some things that are happening in the economy are actually going to make this problem even worse as we go forward. Education.
What are you looking at there?
Yeah, so education continues to become more expensive. Healthcare continues to become more expensive. Technology is dramatically changing the way employees engage with companies to earn a living. Arguably, that's compressing wages, or at least preventing them from increasing as they have done historically. Employment, the definition of employment in America today is dramatically different than, let's say, my granddad. My granddad likely had 2 to 3 jobs in a 45-year career. Today's millennials will likely have 10. So lots more job churn, lots more instability. Add on top of that, all the traditional safety nets like Social Security and pensions are at least being evaluated for change, and in some cases going away. And then on top of that, we have been the beneficiaries of a better healthcare system that promotes longer life expectancy. And so the retirement planning challenge today and in the future is dramatically greater than what it was, 20 years ago. So I think all these things are conspiring to create a real problem. So in my mind, the solutions out there today are pretty mediocre. Very few college and very few high schools actually have financial literacy as a required element of the curriculum. And that most of the books, it's crazy, ridiculous. Right? Yeah. So not, again, probably more detail than you want, but if you look at the budget, the federal government's budget on what we spend in education, there is no breakout for what we spend on financial literacy, but you can kind of piece it together, and it looks like 2 cents for every $100. And I would argue, our youth would be much better served with a year less of chemistry or a year less of Latin,
sure,
and a year of kind of financial literacy training, which is a basic life skill.
That's everybody. Everybody needs that. It's some people are going to go into a profession that needs you need to have your chemistry background or foreign languages or whatever the case might be. But every single human being needs to manage their money well. Yeah,
and it's so much more than simply managing money. I think that's where the game has kind of changed. It used to be if you got an education and worked hard, you could kind of make it work even if you didn't think about it consciously. But today, I think the standard's so much higher to actually achieve success. And I think a lot of the books out there, they're kind of on two extremes. Some of them are oversimplified goal setting books that candidly just don't get it done. And there's some great works out there, but I think many of them are not very accessible. Meaning, if you have a master's degree in business, maybe that works. But if you're a intelligent person that realizes this is an important topic, they're not very accessible. So I'm trying to kind of achieve that balance of offering something that's conversational, big picture, but intellectually rigorous and can really give you some practical advice.
So what would you say is the biggest, if you could identify one, like the one biggest mistake, or maybe it's just two if you can't nail it down to one, like the one biggest mistake that you see families making today in their own financial planning?
Yeah, I think that the definition of financial planning is too narrow. When I say financial planning, people think about managing your money. It's so much bigger than that. It's appreciating all the assets you have. It's your lifetime labor value. It's your Social Security. It's your retirement benefits, and it's your financial capital. But to really see the big picture and think about maximizing all those assets, I think is the number one mistake. The second thing I would tell you is I think it's a question of time horizon. And I think human nature is we focus on things in short-term periods, whether it be a month or a year. And long-term financial security is a 50-year game. And, forcing yourself to kind of think in those kind of time increments is often a common mistake.
And so is this a discipline problem? I mean, part of it is debt. And like you mentioned, credit card debt. I mean, that to me just seems like a discipline problem. Is that part of it? Or is it a lack of understanding that this is an urgent issue until you get into your later years and you go, oh crap, this is urgent, but it's too late?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a little bit of both. So clearly, in many cases, it's a discipline problem. I think we also have to acknowledge the way businesses have evolved and technology have evolved. We've made it so much easier for people to consume. If it used to be, if you wanted to go spend money, you had to get into a car, you go to a store. In many cases, credit wasn't so available, so you had to have the money in a checking account. Today I can peruse, the computer, or I can peruse the aisles of a store from my app on my phone and buy something, very easily. So I think it's half the battle is it's gotten so easy to consume. So discipline is an element of it, but I also think people just don't appreciate the importance of these decisions, and it gets back to it's a 50-year problem, and I'm focused on the next month or the next year. So helping people appreciate the magnitude of the challenge they're creating, I think, is an important part of it.
And so I have a financial advisor. I would imagine a lot of the folks listening do. Why is a financial advisor not enough?
Well, so first of all, I think interestingly, the financial advisor community gets paid to sell products, and many of the things that will generate financial security aren't related to selling a product. That's point one. Point two, I think it's ironic that most financial advisors don't want to really spend a lot of time with clients until they have some money to invest. But arguably, by the time you're 30, 35, many of the pieces of your journey are already set. And so if you go back to this concept of one of the biggest mistakes people make is they don't appreciate all of their assets, like their labor potential, and thinking about building a career or pursuing entrepreneurship or investing in education. And those are some of the things that I explore in the book, and that I think people really need to be thoughtful about as they pursue, kind of financial security.
So can you give us a little bit more about the book? Like what, we open the cover of the book or we buy the book. What are we getting in your book that we're not getting from, our financial advisor, or maybe the sort of general financial knowledge that we already have right now? Yep.
So I think, the first thing is as my personal life experience has evolved, I got out of the service, I went to business school, and I got out of business school and I went to work at Morgan Stanley. And it occurred to me in all that time, economics undergrad degree, business degree from Harvard in finance, I had never actually been taught a personal finance course that I thought was worthwhile at all. And so, a lot of my experiences are reflected in the book. And the basic premise of the book is that there's been all kinds of study about businesses for many years, and we have best practices. And as I was out looking at businesses to invest in, it occurred to me that many of those best practices could actually be applied to my personal financial choices. And so the basic premise of the book is that you can view your family financial decisions in the same way that a business looks at its financial decisions. And if you apply business principles, you'd actually make much better decisions. And the basic concept is that we're all playing the same financial game of life. And that is, whether I'm in your job or I'm in the service or I'm an investor, I'm basically selling my labor into the market and converting my labor potential into capital. And when you think about it that way, it's a pretty neat framework for tying in a bunch of disparate decisions. So it's not simply how do you invest, it's how do you think about investments in education, how do you think about entrepreneurship for you, what's the importance of selecting certain careers, how do you think about insurance? And I struggled with making all those things kind of fit together and understanding the competing demands. And I think the book does a really good job of giving you a holistic framework to kind of navigate those big choices.
Do you talk at all about, or do you take into account following your passion? A lot of listeners, a lot of people in America today are just unfulfilled with their job. They're not happy with their job or their boss, or they feel like there's something bigger or better or different out there. I mean, is that a factor in what we should be thinking about for our careers and our
Yes.
financial labor capital?
Yes. So it's absolutely a factor. And I talk about it a little bit, but I basically take a position that that's not my job. That's your job to figure out. So if you look at how different professions are paid, right, there's a very clear trend that curriculums that focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math are paid substantially more than disciplines that have more of a humanities element. And so my recommendation to folks is do what you're passionate about, do what you love. If you love it and you're passionate, you will very likely be good. But understand as you're making these choices that there are financial implications to the trade-offs. And so for me, it's more about being an informed decision maker than it is about recommending a certain solution.
Sure. It's not just about following your passion. It's not just about money, but it's about finding the best
intersection.
Best fit. The intersection. Yes. Yeah. Makes sense.
So
my listeners like to get clear action items, Doug. So, other than buying your book, can you offer an action item or two like that the listener can take in, let's say, the next 24 to 48 hours to start moving towards their financial goals?
Yes. Yeah. I would say, number one, think about actively managing a career like you manage your money. I've discovered over many years, obviously working hard results in good success, but working smart. And when I say working smart, it's not about being good at the career you've selected or the job you've selected. It's about selecting a career that offers the opportunities that you're looking for. I believe in entrepreneurship is the most surest way to financial security. And I think, we talk a lot about developing a long-term investment plan, but I think I would push people to say, clearly articulate what your financial goals are at retirement. And from that, you can decide what choices you got to make to get there. I think when you push people on, well, what are you actually saving for? They haven't actually done the math on, well, how much do I need? Where do I choose to live? What are the key things that I need to be able to finance? And then use that as the basis to figure out kind of where your North Star is.
And I want to key on one thing you mentioned there. You said entrepreneurship is the best path to financial security. I think some people would say it may be the opposite of that because a lot of businesses fail, and certainly I've had successful business and a failed business. How do you address that? How do you address sort of the uncertainty that does come with entrepreneurship?
Yep. So I argue, listen, we're all entrepreneurs. Even if you're an employee, essentially in my mind is you have one customer, and that happens to be your employer. And so very simplistically, entrepreneurship in my mind is combining your labor and your capital to create a business. And I think a lot of times when we say entrepreneurship, people immediately think of Google or Facebook, and those are huge opportunities and also huge risks that require lots of capital. I think for many Americans, we should think smaller when we think about entrepreneurship and think about one-man sole proprietorships, think about service businesses in your local economy where you've in your current job developed these skills, and now it's about taking those skills and selling them for yourself versus your employer in many cases. And so I think if you think about it that way, it doesn't appear so risky. And I think there are a lot of things about entrepreneurship that allow you to accumulate wealth. Those include it's more tax efficient than being an employee. In many cases, entrepreneurship extends your working life. I see lots of entrepreneurs who are 60 or 70. They're involved enough to enjoy the benefits of ownership and make big decisions, but they've created a team around them that allow them to continue to do it for longer. And ultimately, if you've created a good business, you can actually sell it on the back end. And so I acknowledge the risks. I think the biggest risk is concentration of wealth. But I think on a risk-adjusted basis, entrepreneurship is a real interesting choice for many folks.
Yeah, it's interesting when you put it in perspective of if you're an employee, you basically have one customer, and it's your boss, your employer. And if you lose that one customer, you're out on the street. So it's an interesting and unique way to look at it. And so shift the conversation a little bit, Doug. You're a guy who has achieved a lot in your life, graduated top in your class at West Point, got an MBA from Harvard. You've got a published book. You're a published author now. You've done a lot of amazing things. Are there any kind of habits that you've had in your life that you feel have set you apart or maybe helped you achieve success that maybe the average person doesn't do?
Yeah, maybe. So I'll offer them up, and I'm not sure that I would say the average person doesn't do them, but I know that they've been valuable habits for me. The first is work ethic, and I really think this started for me with sports. I got involved in wrestling very early, and that was a real formative experience for me. And so, that work ethic of understanding that if you want to achieve a goal, you got to put your time in and you've got to work toward it, and it's not about effort during the game. It's about effort in the practice room. And I think the lesson learned for me about my sports was I got so much more out of it in my life after sports than I did during sports. And so work ethic first and foremost. I think I pride myself on being an independent thinker. And I think that's especially valuable in the investment world. There's an old saying that many people would prefer to fail with the masses than succeed alone. And I think success, and if you want to have outlying performance, you need to be willing to make outlying decisions and be willing to stand alone. And so I think I kind of pride myself on being willing to stand alone if I have conviction in the idea or the opportunity. And then I work hard at trying to be emotionally intelligent and read people and be able to take cues. And I think that's one that I continue to work on. So I think it's important. I'm not sure I do it better, but it's an area that I think successful people are generally have pretty high emotional intelligence as well.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I just reiterate how, you've done a lot of amazing things in your life, starting with West Point and top of your class and Harvard MBA and published author and the success you had in business. Can you share a time when you failed? Can you share a time where it was hard for you? Maybe you failed, and as a result, you felt that hopelessness or overwhelming self-doubt that comes with trying to achieve something and failing, but you were able to maybe overcome that and still achieve success.
Yeah. Sure. So first of all, let me acknowledge, man, I'm failing like every day, right? So in the investment business, if you're batting a little more than 500, you're doing pretty well, and so I'm consistently looking at situations and developing a conclusion about what I think will happen, and I'm wrong a lot of the time. So I'm used to failure, and I just kind of accept it as a part of what my job entails. So I'm going to take you back to in my mind, it's a long time ago, but it's such a formative experience for me and such a substantive failure that it still influences me today. So I know you're a Pennsylvania wrestler, so I know you have to have seen the Austin DeSanto Spencer Lee match this year. Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, what an amazing,
incredible,
just an amazing, just an amazing, level of competition. And that's what sports is all about for me. And so as a young person, I had been fortunate to be relatively successful in almost most of the goals I had set for myself.
And for the listener, that match was Spencer Lee was undefeated, 3-time Pennsylvania state champion, and he was upset in the final match of his high school career in the Pennsylvania state finals. By a kid that he dominated. Spencer Lee dominated him a year prior in the state finals, and was upset in the final match of his high school career. Incredible upset, rocked the wrestling world.
And so one more aspect of that, Austin DeSanto, the kid that won, actually dropped a weight class to compete with Spencer. And so there's just so many positive elements of that story in my mind. And I'm so proud of Spencer Lee, the way he handled the loss. But in any case, I aspired to be a state champion. I had set that goal for myself at a very young age, pre-high school. And, going into my senior year, I felt like I had focused and done all the work, and ultimately got upset I didn't even place. That was a real, it's a long time ago, and people would say it's no big deal, but for me, given how much I had put into it, it was pretty devastating. And, it's given me lots of opportunity to kind of question why that happened and what I had done wrong. And I think there's a couple key takeaways for me. One is, as a young wrestler, I focused on what I was good at. So I was good on takedowns, and I would take everybody down and let them up. And I didn't proactively address my weaknesses. And so I think in life, there's lots of that's a good example. And I also think over the course of the season, as I continued to be undefeated, I got tighter and tighter, and more afraid of losing and more afraid of taking risks. And again, I think about life today, and success is all about taking calculated risks, and the ability to put yourself out there in a way that you can expose yourself for the right risk-adjusted decision, I think is another great lesson in life. And in spite of that loss, I think the other thing I figured out is you set big, audacious goals for yourself. You put yourself out there in front of people and you fail, and guess what? Everybody still supports you. They love you, and life goes on. And so while it was a real shortcoming relative to my hopes and my aspirations, I think the takeaway is it wasn't so bad. You get up, you dust yourself off, and you get after it again.
Yeah, and I want to just touch on real quick. One of the things you mentioned is, you'd focus on your strengths, your takedowns, but it sounded like were you saying that you didn't focus enough on developing your weaknesses? Totally.
Yeah. I was playing to my strengths, and I think there's some merit to that. But exceptional people in any endeavor are always thinking about where am I weak and how can I complement those weaknesses. And in general, you're better served spending time on making your weaknesses better than making your strengths better.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. You hear people out there that sometimes it's just, it's kind of internet famous gurus trying to make a name for themselves or be contrarian just to make some headline that the people click on a blog post. But they say you have to, forget your weaknesses, bet on your strengths, forget your strengths, put everything into your weaknesses. It's like, it's not one or the other. You have to do both. You got to bet on your strengths. If you're best on your feet and with takedowns, you're going to go neutral in the third period if you're down by a point or whatever the case might be. But when you're talking about your weaknesses, like, you've got to work on those too. You can't just ignore your weaknesses, because those are, it's like the pack is only as fast as the slowest member. And so you've got to improve your weaknesses and improve those things that are holding you back. Because if you're trying to find success in whatever it is, whether it's health or fitness or finances or relationships, whatever the case might be, you've got to figure, okay, where am I strong? I'm going to continue to invest there. Where am I weak? What's holding me back from getting to the next level? Because there's some weakness in here that if I improve upon that, it's going to move everything else forward. It's going to allow everything else to move forward and allow my strengths to be better. So if you're a bad wrestler on bottom and you can't get out and get onto your feet, so you can actually do the thing that you're good at, is work on your feet and work on takedowns, then your strength, you can't take advantage of your strength. You've got to work on that weakness so that you can actually take advantage of your strength. So I think it's not as simple as one or the other. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. You got to work on both. You got to bet on both. So.
Yeah, Jim, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier in the conversation, this whole concept of learning to work smart. This in my mind gets back to, really being thoughtful about whether it's wrestling or business. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What environment can I employ that package of capabilities to get the best bang for the buck? and then where do I need to invest to improve? And so, whether that's wrestling or business or, academia, that same general concept, I think works a lot. And being introspective to really, be objective about where you are, what you're good at, what you're not so good at.
Yeah, agreed. And Doug, do you have any favorite book in addition to your own? Any favorite book or books that you could share?
Yeah, so I'm going to not give you necessarily my favorite, but my most recent read. So I love to read like murder mysteries and stuff like that. I'm not going to bore you with those. But if there's a book that I would recommend to folks today as you're thinking about what's going on in America, it's called Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance.
Yeah, interesting. That was just recommended for the first time a couple of weeks recently on the podcast here. Okay.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm a huge fan. I read it on vacation, and it's the title. The more complete title, I think, is Hillbilly Elegy: A Family and a Nation in Crisis, and it talks about the struggles of this young man who had come from, an economically depressed area in Kentucky and then Ohio. And so it was interesting for me because, you could change the word Kentucky, Ohio, and put Pennsylvania or West Virginia in there as well. And so it has relevance for me from my home state, but also I just think it's a really interesting story about some of the challenges that America is facing. And so very thought-provoking.
Excellent. Doug, this has been a great interview. Can you take a few minutes or just a minute and promote yourself a little bit? Let the listener know where he or she can find your book, your website, follow you, interact with you, etc.
Sure. So, the book again is called Family Inc. Using Business Principles to Maximize Your Family's Wealth. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble. I have a website called familyinc.com. And on the website there is more information about the philosophy. There are also some tools. So you can think about what your family income statement looks like, what your family balance sheet looks like, et cetera. And one more, thing I would highlight about the book is I think financial literacy is important for all Americans. I think our veteran community has some unique challenges as they navigate this financial game of life. And so I'm doing a lot with veteran service organizations and the veteran community to kind of bring these principles and the teachings so that folks that are getting out of service can effectively transition and create good careers in financial security. And so I'm donating book proceeds and doing a lot on that front. And so your purchase will go to good things.
Excellent. And like I said, Doug, thank you for your service, but also thank you for your continued service of, like you said, the veterans that you're helping right now. It's very noble what you're doing, and I know it comes straight from your heart, and I've learned about some of the great things you're doing. So keep it up, and thank you for that continued service.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jim. I really appreciate the show and the approach. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Doug. And for the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.